Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'm going to talk about a series by probably one of my two favorite current manga artists, mangaka, Inio Asano. It's one volume away. I just got the 10th volume. The 11th volume will be the final volume, so I figured I'd talk about it now, and then maybe everyone else can get hyped for the last volume. So this is Dead Dead Demons DEDEDE Destruction. Big long title. It's published by Viz. Like I said, there's been 10 volumes so far. His other major work so far is Goodnight Pun Pun, and that's something that Sean and I are going to take a look at together because Sean's never read Mr. Asano's work, but I think he's one of the most fascinating mangaka going on right now. So this is his big follow-up to Goodnight Pun Pun, and it's a very interesting sci-fi. So this character, Dededede, and her friend live in a world in which a gigantic spaceship has just been hanging out over Tokyo for something like 4 years, and there have been invasions. Some of the aliens have made it down to Earth. There's radiation zones that they're living in, and just it's not really so much a sci-fi. That just sets up the character drama and what's going on in the town. So it's just, what is it like to live under this, conditions. This book definitely started before COVID hit in Japan, but it feels very prophetic about this idea of living in lockdown almost, living under this constant terror of this invader that we don't really know anything about, except here it's not hidden, it's out in the open. Asano's work, as you can see from this, is incredibly detailed, super realistic. It's just fantastic artwork. Here's Dededede. The girls are really interested. Her and her group of friends are really interested in the aliens. Pieces of the ship will fall off, or little subships will come down, and they'll chase them around, and they're involved in social media groups. The stories revolves around political situations going on, personal situations going on due to the spaceship, worldwide politics, and then local personal stuff. There's these fun kind of chapter headers. I don't know if he's drawing them. I think he's drawing them and just taking that as an excuse to draw in different styles. But very famous for these. Asano himself is very famous for these really realistic backgrounds and then these very expressive characters. And he always finds these shots that, to me, like, have a sense of awe in them. These big 2-page spreads like this. Here's another one of the two girls, Dededede and Antan, I believe is her name, her best friend, with the giant spaceship in the background. He's an artist that really inspires me now. His sense of mood and just the inventiveness of his imagery is really fantastic. I don't want to talk too much about the story. I think it's something you should experience on your own. But I wanted to flip through just some of my favorite images and little kind of conventions he has within the stories throughout the volumes. One thing I really like is that every volume starts out with this Isobayan, which is a comic about this funny little mushroom character. Some of the production on these, by the way, the printing's really good, but this book's already fallen apart and I bought it new. So that's a bit of a problem in these productions from Viz. The newer volumes seem to be less likely to fall apart. But anyways, this is Isobayan character, this mushroom, and he always has some funny technology that he gives to this character, and the technology gets her into trouble. Yeah, this whole page is going to come out. And then that always leads into one of the characters reading that. So that starts each volume. I really like that. Here you get another page of the spaceship just hanging out in the background while people go to their day-to-day lives. And another really fun kind of stylistic play going to the old 8-bit games there. I know I've seen one of those Monbin episodes of Asano working, so he uses a lot of computer modeling. Like, all of this stuff would have been designed and modeled in a computer. and then they're using that to collage together photographs and his drawings and these into the computer. So I really like the way he's using technology, but then still doing a lot of analog drawing by hand. I think now he draws entirely digitally. Always, always, always in his work, these beautiful renderings of light, how light works, especially at night. He's very interested in dark atmospheres. And I mean, he never cheats out. Like almost every panel has a background in it. It's very rare that you get a panel like this. And even this one has little snowflakes falling in the background. One of the characters winds up being an alien invader in a human suit. So you get these really inventive imagery of the head twisting off. I think that's the biggest thing that stands out to me in all of his work is how inventive his images are. When you see it in a sci-fi context, it gets extra cool. So here's like a big chunk of the ship has fallen. And I mean, like every detail of every building in these is drawn. This is the first time in a one-man review where I've scanned some images because I want to see them up close. I haven't looked them up close, but high-resolution scans to see exactly all what's going on in here. But within all of that detail of the sci-fi stuff, really his strength is in his character and his ability to have his characters emote and his abilities. I'll show in some of the later volumes very comical characters of different people. So the collision between those two things and his ability to create these striking images like this, combined with the type of inventive stories that he's telling, make Asano just, I think, the premier young, I don't know, he's probably in his 40s now, but I associate him with younger generation mangaka. Images like this where the invaders are falling, God, I don't know, there's got to be 700-800 of them on there at least, with the whole city back there. I mean, I can't, there's 10 of these volumes already, and I can't go through and show every crazy image that he's come up with. And there's a real sense of wonder in all of his work. They're dark works. Goodnight Pun Pun is abysmally bleak in, I think, a very powerful way. But there's always this childish sense of wonder in his work, too. So they've got these little helicopter things that spin, and the looks on their faces, and, again, the way that light and nighttime is handled, and shooting stars is always part of his thing. At this point, they go into one of the characters' memories, and they introduce a alternate possible timeline. I'm probably going to reread the whole series once it's all together and I think get a clearer picture of what's going on in this sequence. And this sequence actually winds up lasting a couple volumes. But I love this. It's almost like that movie, that Matthew McConaughey movie, Interstellar, where he goes into the fifth dimension and they're trying to show memory and time, and it's these fracturing of panels. And he's obviously, him and his assistants are using digital technologies for these. But this kind of imagery that just you've never seen before in comics. Just absolutely fascinating. So this is one of the pages I scanned because I want to see this up close. They're obviously sampling and distorting panels from all throughout different volumes of the book and then mashing them up into this gigantic memory. It's kind of like he's in her memory storage, her storage bank in her memories as a computer. So, I mean, stuff that blows my mind, stuff that makes me want to, oh man, I gotta up my game. Images like this, obviously, again, using computer modeling and then Photoshop effects and then hand drawing on top of it. But it never feels like just a computer mapped in there. It's always well integrated. Here's another example of him having fun with the chapter. Using like the cute little chibi-ish look. And I believe in the story with this stuff is probably in English originally. I'm really curious about how he uses English because there's so much in here that seems hand lettered. I'm wondering how much, because so much of it's done on the computer, like all of the t-shirts and stuff, if that's stuff that's done after the fact in translation, or if that's in the originals, if they're able to do it so effectively because he's working digitally and so the lettering's all on other layers. It's something that I'm seeing in this book, that's really, really fascinating to me, is how much English there is integrated into everything. And it doesn't look like they had to erase that out and put it in English. That would be impossible. Here you start to get some of his really great characters. So Trump, and then he's got these American, or believe these guys are French, French guys that are really interested in Japanese culture, kind of obsessively interested in Japanese culture. And I love how he plays with different styles, different shapes of heads, things like that make his yeah, here you see a bunch of like this guy with his like overly square head, and a lot of these buck-tooth characters. Yeah, really great artist of the human figure. You see them dressing up, they're into their cosplay. Another one of these homages to a typical manga style. So he seems very aware of a wide variety. Here's another one, a wide variety of different art styles, and has fun playing with that. And that shows up in the caricature as well, I think, is that different characters kind of embody different stylistic conventions, which is interesting. Here's another one of these, just beautiful spreads, really emotion pieces. That's something that I've been inspired by and am going to be stealing from as I move forward in my own career. Here's some more of this super intense, like these are all boxes. It probably doesn't even show up on camera, but hundreds of boxes, and each one has panels in it. That was actually something I was thinking about doing on Strange Death of Alex Raymond. So I was really happy to see someone else do it in a book. This is probably, I don't know, I'd have to see this printed at Strange Death of Alex Raymond size, but this book actually may beat us out for how small they're reproducing dots and lines. But when it's shrunk down to manga, I don't know. I think they are packing it more detail than Dave and I did. There's another play with style that I really like. Another really just detail packed but also fun spread. Now I think it's in this volume, maybe it's in an earlier volume, he starts doing something with the art where it's like he's doing ink washes and then converting them to tones, and so you'll get the dot tones more obvious, and then there's ink washes, what looks like ink washes over top of the work, and that's another thing that I've scanned that I'm interested in. And sometimes he'll pile the dots on top of it, and I don't know, they still, obviously the art's still great in these, but something about that is it's almost like too much. I don't think the ink wash is necessary when there's also all this tone work going on. And that starts to distract away from me from the beauty of just his line work and everything. It almost gets a little too murky. I don't know if that's intentional. His work does veer kind of intentionally dark, if it's just some new technique that he's playing around with. I mean, there's still great books. It's just the earlier books in the volume have a certain crispness to the art where it's all black and white line art and obvious tone patterns, and that seems more holistic. These ones start looking more like just manipulated photographs, which I know his backgrounds are manipulated photographs, but the skies and stuff start to look more like they just changed a photograph. So I don't like that look as much. But still, I mean, better than almost anything else you could pick up. And this is the latest volume, volume 10. So again, some really fun characters, the grandma and the young girl here. Again, this like English lettering on the shirts that looks so like part of the image. I'd imagine that's part of the original image. And then the weird wash look that I'm not as much of a fan of. I just don't think it needs it, or it could be done with the tone and be more integrated. Here's an example of a sky that just looks like a bad photocopy of a sky to me. but a lot of now political things, and you see again he's got these really fun characters of the politicians. Some more, just because I was reading this one, another really inventive image. But see, with the addition of the tones too, I think some of his images get hard to interpret, especially because he's taking risks. So here he has a character that has a blanket that makes him invisible. And there's some cool things going on here that make the character invisible. But with everything else going on, the images start to get a little noisy and hard to interpret. Like the images don't stand out as easily. So I worry about that direction in the art. Like, if it keeps getting noisier and noisier like that, I may not enjoy it as much. But again, these intense spreads of like living under this pressure of this ship, and I want to reiterate how timely this book feels and how prophetic it feels. I think that's one of the things I enjoy most about it is it feels right to me. I've been thinking very hard about how in the world to even do stories during COVID. Like, do you have everyone wearing masks? Or that will feel dated in a while. I mean, hopefully it will feel dated. But I want to get started on a story that has like day-to-day stuff, but if we're still wearing masks 10 years from now, it won't feel genuine. This feels like a good way to, even though he didn't start out addressing COVID, at least it feels like a way of dealing with what we're dealing with without having to lean too hard into the reality of it. Another one of those really wonder-filled 2-page spreads. He does this a lot, these thin lines going across that kind of have like dust and light moving through the air. So a ton of beautiful techniques. Again, it seems like he's leaning back into less work being done after the fact and more just Photoshop manipulation of images. So they look more like photographs on some of these images. And I get it, you're pumping out, I don't know how frequently this comes out in Japan, but they're pumping these things out, so it makes sense that they would resort to that. But I just feel like in the earlier volumes, it felt more like all drawn, even though I know there was some manipulations on it. So fantastic series. I don't know when volume 11 is due out, but I would highly recommend everyone snatch up 1 through 10. This is counting down to 12 hours until the end of humanity. So that's been building up the whole time. Like, this ship is going to crash, and there's these invaders that have got onto Earth that are now like refugees. And I really haven't gone into the story, but it's a very emotionally and politically complicated story. Now, unlike normal in these one-man reviews, I do want to look at 2 scans just because I was so curious about seeing one of those super dense pages up close, and because I wanted to look at an image that had that ink wash and see how they were doing it. I wanted to know if they were doing the stochastic screening that Sean was talking about, or if it was just a finer grained halftone with then the tone on top. And when I scan in this image, there's an image of this gun. I do see that it is, let's go all the way in. So again, this is a 1200 DPI scan of the little tankobon size, and I do see that it's like a larger dot tone over a really fine halftone. So the halftone it was fine enough that I couldn't see it with the naked eye. But you see this weird washy effect. When I saw the Monbin episode, he purposely did some stuff to mess up the cleanness of the tone. He was saying he liked the look of old manga where the tones weren't perfect. So normally Sean and I would look at a tone like this and be like, this is a couple generations down. It's been all kind of beat up. Not something he goes for intentionally. And then I think his scanning ink wash effects and putting them over grays that he does in the computer, so it looks more naturalistic, which is nice. But I don't know that I like the combo of like that and then the larger tone over top of it. It feels like it could all be done just with tones. It's just not as clean as some of the earlier work. But it's an interesting look, and it's an interesting technique that I think a lot of people could pick up on. And then these books are printed on and I assume it's probably something he wants, since he's talking about the look and feel of like the manga of his childhood. But you can see here evidence of the paper being a pretty like rough kind of newsprint feeling paper, and I think that's causing bleeds on the dot as well. And I think that's, again, I think it's intentional, but I would really love to see, you know, a larger, I think Asano's work is someone who deserves to be collected in large hardcovers, because he does go so hard onto into the crazy details. And here's the scan of that interstellar fifth dimensional half of that spread, and I just wanted to look at it super up close. Yeah, you can see all the tone that they're doing. These are obviously like cut and pasted panels from other volumes that are all chopped up. And then the tones, this is kind of interesting to me. The tones are being, he's taking images that are toned and stretching them sideways, so they're getting weird patterns in there, it looks like. It's not like he redid the tones on that. So he's allowing the computer, like right here you can see, that's interesting. You can see the dots themselves being stretched, and then getting, I think intentionally again, getting a little muddy in the process, but also having the lines break up and losing the lines. So I do, it's the thing I love most about his work is how inventive it is. But I do feel sometimes, and it's probably something I'm guilty of too, maybe why I feel an affinity for this guy, is I'm really interested in these kind of computer glitch images, and they lead to a more chaotic image than most people are able to process. I think they get a little too muddy and a little too, yeah, just glitchy and chaotic. Where you can't really perceive the details. You kind of just get overwhelmed by the messy totality of it. So that's an ethic that I'm interested in art, and I really wish we could talk to him and see if this is something he's doing intentionally creating overly noisy images that are almost hard to perceive. But I think it's like the greatest strength of his work, but also maybe pushes towards the point of being a weakness, where some of the stuff is hard to look at. But I think it's also like a statement about the world right now, that the world's so information rich. There's so much noise. It's hard to filter it all and interpret it. So it feels very contemporary in that way to me. You know, it seems appropriate for the time, even if it's a little difficult. So I don't know. I think these are fantastic works. He's a fantastic artist. I've nabbed everything I can get by him that's translated, and I would highly recommend the same. And then keep an eye out for when Sean and I do the Goodnight Pun Pun, because that's one of the best comics I've ever read, and I think you all will enjoy it. But buy that one as well. All right, guys. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.